looking forward to this and any questions that you may have. So we're going to be talking about advancing your Agile coaching career, which has a couple of different parts. One of the parts is we're going to talk about Agile coaching. One of the parts is we're going to talk about different tricks to add to your bag of tricks, if you will. Oh, well, tricks is maybe not the best word. Tools, techniques. And then we're going to talk about certification and Eliassen. So first, just want to let you know, for those of you that are considering coming to our upcoming workshop on February 3rd and 4th, that'll be here in Boston at the Wakefield Sheraton. And actually, this material comes from some of our Agile coaching workshops, so it gives you a little bit of a preview of what you could expect there. All the details are on our website. And actually, watching this webinar is part of the prep work. And also the second webinar, Agile Vital Signs, which will be coming up next Tuesday, is also part of the prep work. So we've taken what would normally be a 2.5-day workshop, and it's 2 days on-site and a half-day of prep. So if you're interested in that, all the details are on our website. And so basically, I already mentioned the agenda earlier. There it is again. And this will be available as a video. So there will be some, as a recorded video, so there will be some slides that I may not spend a lot of time on that have a lot of detail on them, like recommended books, but you can get all that from the video when it's posted. So first of all, when we talk about Agile coaching, what is Agile coaching? So just think about what would be your definition of Agile coaching from what goes through your mind. And I know when I was first exposed to the idea of Agile coaching a long time ago, it sounded to me like a consultant who was an Agile expert, and that's not a terrible definition. Actually, it sounds like some folks haven't muted themselves. If everybody could mute themselves for now, that'd be great. But that's not a terrible definition, but hopefully that's just a place to get started, because there's a lot more to Agile coaching than just being an expert on Agile. So the way that we look at it is, this is not the only way to look at it, but the way we look at it is that there's the coach and the coachee, if you will, the person that you're going to be coaching. I think there's still some folks that haven't muted themselves there, so please do hit the mute if you can. In any case, there's a number of things that are required for the person that you're coaching to solve whatever their problem is from an Agile perspective, and we're talking here from an Agile perspective. So there's coaching, there's Agile knowledge, Agile experience, Agile thinking, and then there's also the situational information. So that'll be things like if you're working with the IT department at a company that does aeronautics or something like that. That's the situational context, the politics there, relationships, the actual process there. So the coachee is going to have all of that. And yes, it's important for you as the coach to absorb some of that, but really that should be the people that you're coaching and not you. Now on the coaching side, you may bring a little coaching skill to the folks you're coaching, and maybe you're going to create some internal coaches over time, but that's really primarily the Agile coach. The other thing is you're going to be bringing knowledge, experience, and Agile thinking, but the idea is you want to pass those on. You want to work towards getting the folks that you're coaching up on Agile knowledge, experience, and thinking. Right? So together, we're going to take all this together and help the person or the people that you're coaching solve their own problems. Right? So you're really not there as a fix-it. You're not trying to say, okay, I am going to do the work here. You're trying to get them to do that. So that's really the primary role of an Agile coach. So digging into that a little bit deeper, there are a couple of different modes that you might use to interact, right? So there's coaching, which is what we've just talked about, which is really you're not imparting necessarily any new knowledge, you're not doing the work, but you're helping them go through the process of, how can I solve this problem myself? Now, you might move to mentoring, consulting, or teaching from there, but you always want to try to start with coaching and see if that can work. Because at the end of the day, at some point, you're not going to be there. Okay, so then mentoring, right? So you're working with a team and you realize there's no Scrum Master. They realize there's no Scrum Master. You need to get a Scrum Master, and maybe there's somebody that's appropriate there that you identify. They raise their hand or whatever. Maybe somebody's appointed, unfortunately appointed. But anyway, at the end of the day, you're going to then move to mentoring that person because they haven't done it before, let's say. So in that, you may step in as the Scrum Master and say, this is what it is to be a Scrum Master. Now you try it, and then moving to more giving them feedback until finally you step back and say, okay, this is more of a coaching role here. And then, of course, teaching, which could take many forms. That could be, training, that could be workshops, that could be on-the-fly teaching. But really, you want to think of these in your head, what makes the most sense for me to do here? Should I be in a coaching mode? Should I be in a mentoring mode? Maybe they've got a limited amount of time to write some user stories, and they've asked you to write some user stories, and you think, well, wow, they're really in a tight spot here. So you know what? I'm going to make an exception, and I will write some user stories for you. But in general, as the Agile coach, I should not be doing that. In addition, for mentoring, you may be mentoring folks in most likely in a Scrum Master role or perhaps a product owner role. Now, if you've been a manager, a people manager before, you may be mentoring people on how to be a people manager within an Agile setting, but most likely that's not something you're going to be focusing on. If anything, you'll be helping managers become more of an Agile coach kind of a thing. So you need to be able to be the Scrum Master if you're going to mentor somebody. It's very difficult to mentor somebody on how to be anything if you haven't actually done it before. Now, Scrum Master, that's kind of a mandatory requirement. Product Owner, that's great if as an Agile coach you can step in as the product owner, but actually the minimum there is that you're able to identify product owners and to say this person could be a product owner. They should go get product owner training. Maybe there's some other product owners in the organization that you can tap to mentor the product owner for the team that you're working on. But really, ideally, you need to be able to step in as the product owner or minimally understand what makes a good product owner and help point somebody towards somebody that can mentor them. Facilitator, that's another role that you're going to take on as either a Scrum Master or product owner, or if it's group coaching. So you get a bunch of folks together during the retrospective, they say, we got this issue and we kind of like you to facilitate us through this. So being a facilitator is understanding that role and being able to step in is very important as an Agile coach. So now we're not going to talk a lot about facilitating today, but that is actually part of the workshop that's coming up. So the concept that we like to use at Eliassen for describing, how to stay in the role of an Agile coach is maximizing your Agile coach ROI. So here, it's not return on investment. This isn't necessarily a financial thing. This is more, to use that concept, return on involvement. So you're spending time within an engagement doing Agile coaching. How do you measure the return on that? So I would say the way to look at that is, are you ready to step away yet and have them be self-sufficient? Right? So what you want to maximize there as your return is their awareness of issues. For them to walk into a stand-up and say, whoa, we're in a world of hurt here, as opposed to walking in and being like, okay, I get my status, I'm done, can I leave now? Right? So being aware of issues. Anything that you're going to do, think, am I maximizing their awareness of issues, whether through knowledge or pointing something out perhaps? Am I this thing that I'm about to do, is this the way to maximize their Agile knowledge? Are they going to learn something here? Am I increasing their desire to change? And another retrospective. Or are they thinking, ooh, that's an interesting idea, a different way to do the retrospective. I like that. Let's try that. Are you maximizing their desire to change? Are you maximizing their experience? So if you suggest something for them to do, then that's not necessarily going to increase their Agile experience. For instance, they might say, oh, we're thinking we could do A, B, or C. What do you think we should do? I say, well, hey, all of those are actually perfectly valid approaches. And yeah, I might have a preference there, but I think this is the time to take an experiment. So to do an experiment. So why don't you guys think about what do you want to do? Try it. And I don't think you can go wrong with any of these options. And so they're going to be gaining the Agile experience there, right? So you're helping them understand, yep, those are good ideas. Let's try it. The extreme there would be to see that somebody's going to drive off a cliff and just like, hey, let's see how this experiment goes. Maybe not the best thing to do in that case. and their Agile thinking. Is this going to help them to be thinking more in terms of Agile? And are they going to be taking ownership, right? So if they see you as the Agile coach as owning the transformation, they're going to be much less likely to step up with ideas and try experiments and that kind of thing. So you're going to be thinking, this action, I could take this action or that action. Which action is going to maximize these things in the lower right here? Right, so the kinds of actions you can do come under coaching, facilitating, mentoring. Mentoring. Wow, this person comes to me with a lot of product owner questions and user story questions and that kind of stuff, and I can see they're really applying it. And the product owner that we have assigned here is really more of a product manager, and they're never here. I wonder if I should be moving towards mentoring this person. Right, so there's a lot of different actions you could take. And you want to encourage as much as you possibly can delegating the transformation work, so that in the beginning maybe you are leading the transformation, but can you delegate that to somebody? Can you delegate pieces of it? Right, so if you move towards having a transformation backlog, who's going to take the various stories in that backlog? And pulling from you, that really means rather than you going and finding people, can you encourage people to come to you and say, hey, it does look like I need some help here. It does look like I need some coaching here, rather than you doing all the work. Because really, when you're gone, hopefully you've helped them create internal champions, right? And gotten that whole system up and going that they should be thinking about, where can I get some help? Self-directed learning, right? So adults learn best when their learning is self-directed. So rather than say, hey, read this book, maybe you give them a list of recommendations and say, you know what, you want to learn, you want to advance, here's some ideas. So try to set up self-directed learning, try to get them towards experimenting. The thing you want to avoid and to do as little of these things as you possibly can, right, is in the upper left. Right, so directly doing the work. Now there may be a time, you don't want to be a jerk, right? So if they say, hey, oh my goodness, the iteration is starting on Monday morning and our product owner is out sick and we don't have anybody else that knows how to write user stories right now, can you do it? For you to say, well, I'm the Agile coach, I can't do that. In that case, maybe it does make sense to do that work. But in general, you want to try to do as little of actually doing the delivery work as possible. You want to do as little directing, right, so that, telling people what to do, even advising, you want to try to do as little of that as possible. So if somebody says, oh, we could do A, B, or C, right, like in the earlier example, instead of saying I advise A, you could say, well, those actually all sound reasonable, right? So your coaching there would be to help them understand that they are starting to think in the right direction, they're definitely applying what they've learned, and now it's time to do an experiment, right? That's what the stand-ups and the retrospectives are for. And rather than you push and say, this is what we need to do next, try to get it set up so that, that they're creating the backlog and prioritize that they're taking on the work. So now you're going to have to do a lot of those things in the upper left in the beginning, but you want to try to move as much as you can to some of the other things, right? To be always thinking, how can I maximize the return on involvement, right? So that's really, this next slide is pretty much what I've said. This is where self-awareness and self-management comes in. What am I doing right now? Am I maximizing my involvement? Am I moving this organization forward, or are they becoming dependent on me? So the different, so you want to be thinking, what approach should I be taking in this case? So somebody comes to you and they say, hey, I need you to run this iteration planning session. I need some training on this, right? So you could just say, okay, great, let me do that. But what I'm suggesting here is to be thinking, can I move that to coaching? Oh, so you want me to run the upcoming iteration planning. My understanding was that the product owner was going to do that. What happened there? Oh, yeah, it turns out he's out sick. Okay, well, it seemed to me that Susan would be really good at this. Maybe we can have her step in there. Oh, okay, great. Right, so can you move this up a level? Right, so if they come with you at you with a consulting request, can you move that more to teaching? Yes, I could do that, but actually that's pretty straightforward. Let me show you. I could work with you if you like. Or maybe you have a new product owner and they're asking your advice on something, and you say, I'm pretty sure actually that I've seen you work before on that. I think you've got that actually, and if you'd like me to work with you a little bit, that's fine. But I think you're really good in that area. I don't think you need me there anymore. Right? So always move it up towards coaching if you possibly can. Now, if a team is new to Agile, you might be starting out with mentoring, right? So there is no Scrum Master, there is no product owner, they've got no idea what's going on, right? And you've done the training. Maybe you start out and say, you know what, I'll start out as your product owner and your Scrum Master because we don't have those right now. But we need to figure out who's going to take on those roles pretty quickly so we can move towards mentoring. All right, so let's see. So supporting all of this is soft skills, and right, this is pretty obvious that for Agile coaches, you really need to be good at those soft skills. But what soft skills? There are a lot of them, the reason for this really is at the end of the day, let's face it, a 2-day course on Scrum, for instance, is not going to make you, is not going to take a team to Agile overnight. But at the end of the day, if people would just, if you came in and said, this is what you should do, and they just did it, your job would be done, right? It would be simple. But at the end of the day, this is all about change, right? This is going to Agile, going to Scrum. There's a lot of change. A lot of it is very counterintuitive. It can get people upset or worried, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So really, this is a change management problem. Change is hard. Soft skills help out, so you can figure out, where's this person coming from? Why are they upset about this? What are they worried about? What's really going on with the folks that I'm coaching? And the good news is that all of these soft skills can be learned and or improved, right? So if you're not familiar with emotional intelligence, you can absolutely learn it and apply it. Now, I'm sure that many of the folks on this call are familiar with some or all of these. So to some degree, this may be a little bit of a reminder, but absolutely these are important skills. And for instance, I can tell you about them in this webinar, but doing them live, whether practicing with some friends or other coaches, or coming to, whether it's our workshop or somebody else's, that's really what you want to do, is practice these things. This looks a little bit like an eye chart. I'm not going to go into great detail here. Highly recommend reading the book Emotional Intelligence 2.0. But a quick overview here. Self-awareness is, you're talking to somebody and actually thinking, what am I saying? How am I feeling? Is my current tone of voice based on this conversation, or is it based on the fact that, I got an issue back at home with my significant other that's bothering me? Do I need to sort of take a breather and reschedule this for tomorrow? Do I need to say, hang on, I'm not really listening. Give me a moment to clear my thinking. So self-awareness, what's going on in my head right now? How am I behaving? Social awareness is really the same thing, but applied to other people, whether it's one person that you're talking to in a one-on-one situation or groups of people. So, nobody's talking at the stand-up. Something's going on, right? So being aware of the social implications. And then self-management is applying both self-awareness and social awareness to your own behavior. Wow, the stand-up was going really well, and then I cracked that joke, and now nobody's looking at me. I clearly stepped on something there. I wonder what it was. All right, so taking in both the self-awareness, social awareness, taking in cues, and having that influence your behavior. So now it's not just taking in the cues, but it's being mindful of what you're doing as you're coaching and thinking on a regular basis that you need to be self-aware, that you need to be socially aware, that you need to do self-management, right? So that can be seem a little artificial, or can actually slow you down at the beginning, but once you get into it, it becomes second nature. Now, the relationship management is a little bit harder to teach, right? But this is just a point that it is important to practice relationship management, because we all have good days and bad days, and some days you're coaching and maybe you're just not in a good mood, or people aren't really listening because you're clearly distracted. So whatever. But creating good relationships with the folks that you're coaching is very important, so that they understand that you're there for them, and that when you have that bad day, or you say something that could be taken multiple ways, they realize, this person is a good person. I like them, and they're here for me, and I'm just going to point out to them that they said something a little off there, and I know we'll get through it. right? So having that as backup is very important. You're not just there to be the professor or whatever. You're there to create good relationships, get credibility, trust, and so that your message will be heard, right? So just being an expert is not enough. So active listening is not really, part of emotional intelligence per se, but if you want to implement emotional intelligence, you really need, in my opinion, you really need to be good at active listening. Now, it's called active listening. It really should be, I don't know what's a better word, but active paying attention, perhaps, right? Because you're using not only your ears, but your eyes. You're paying attention to body language, to mood, to what's, silences, what's not being said, reading between the lines. Right, so this is really trying to absorb all of the information coming from other people, whether it's one person or a group. Right, so just hearing and being quiet while somebody's talking is actually not active listening. You may be being quiet because you're trying to think of what you're going to say next. So you're not actually absorbing everything that's being said. Right, so the thing is, as an Agile coach, your work is actually other people's work. You're not communicating with people to say, hey, I need this from you, or, what can I do for you, and then going back to your own work. Other people's work is your work. Other people's success is your success. So you really need to get into the other person's perspective and shoes and understand, practically mental telepathy to figure out what they need so that you can help them there. That's why active listening is so important. And it doesn't require agreeing per se. It just means that you understand what they've said. So to know if you're successful at active listening, one of the techniques is, so active listening is a huge discipline, and one of the best books I think on that is something called People Skills, which doesn't sound like active listening, but People Skills, fantastic book. And one of the techniques there is reflective listening. So we're gonna go through a little exercise here. So I understand it's a little one way here because it's a webinar, but I'm going to take you through a scenario, and I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the coach here. Okay, and we're going to practice something called reflective listening. Reflective listening is one of the ways to do reflective active listening. So it is, when you're listening to somebody as an Agile coach, it's very tempting to observe, investigate, and listen in order to diagnose and then recommend a solution, right? So it can be tempting to be the Agile doctor. When you go to the doctor's office, you're not really expecting for them to make you into a better doctor. You say, hey, it hurts here, and I'm having this issue. What do I need to do? And they will tell you. As an Agile coach, really, you're listening to figure out what's going on so you can help the person solve the problem, unless, of course, you need to move to mentoring or something like that. So it's important, maybe you're going to diagnose, not necessarily to tell them what to do, but so you can see, I'm thinking maybe here's the solution. This is very active, thinking about the problem that needs to be solved here. And they're thinking about doing something here, so you can see what the gap is to say, oh, okay, that's a huge gap. Or maybe there's some training we need to do or some mentoring. But if it's a tiny little gap, or there's all kinds of different options there, then it's more going to be a coaching thing. But anyway, so let me give you some context here. Put yourself in the shoes of the Agile coach here. So we're working in an organization where they're selling software as part of their solution, and the sales organization is pretty upset. They're pressing for more detailed information about what's going to be in each release and when it will be available. And guess what? They want to know even more in advance. So that's the situation. I'm sure you've never heard of that. Now, the engineering teams are complaining that they're being micromanaged. They're asking for better estimates, and we're being asked every day for updates. That's, right, so they're not too happy. Now, there's a bunch of teams, doing Agile. Many of the teams are using story points, and those folks are balking at giving hour estimates. They're like, we do story points, we don't do hours. And they don't want to give hours remaining either. Now, we started out with that, we don't do it anymore, we use story points. Right, so that's a little bit of the context. So your client in this case, the person you're coaching is the VP of engineering. All right, so I'm gonna role play as the VP of engineering here for a moment, right? So, I don't like story points. They're not immutable. I don't like them. I like days. I mean, days are pretty straightforward. You can easily add up the work, find out when everything will be done, and then hold the teams accountable. Of course, there's always the unexpected, but I got to tell you, we don't really find out what's going on if there's a problem until the end, and then we're really screwed, right? At that point, sales gets really upset with us. They're like, "You're late again." If only the developers had more commitment and a higher sense of urgency when they fall behind. You know what they say? They just say, "Well, nobody's good at estimating," and then they wash their hands of it. But I'm so sick of that. All right, so that's what you heard. Now, what I want you to do is, whether you write down some bullet points or not, just spend a minute thinking about, what did I just hear? Just think about, what were some of the points, takeaways? You might be thinking, wow, that guy was kind of a jerk. Man, I'm glad I don't have to deal with that VP of engineering. Or you might be thinking, wow, that's pretty standard. You might be thinking, well, he clearly doesn't understand story points. I got to do some training on that. You might have all kinds of thoughts. So, all right. So a great way to check what you heard, to make sure that you heard what the person was actually saying, that you were paying attention, and to make sure you've got all the information, is to use reflective listening. And in this case, paraphrasing. So I'm going to paraphrase. This may or may not be the best. You might have a different way that you would paraphrase it, and that's fine. So here's how I'm paraphrasing that. And this, actually, I should point out that this was a real situation. This is an actual example. So I said, it sounds like there's some challenges with story points, and that you prefer to estimate in days. I also hear that you don't find out until too late when there are implementation problems, and then the teams just throw up their hands and say it isn't their fault. And to top it off, you got sales breathing down your neck. And the response was, pretty much, although I really don't care how estimates are done, as long as I get more of a heads up so that we can reset expectations when there are problems. Now, I got to tell you, my thought when I was in that situation was that VP of engineering was kind of difficult to work with. But what I learned by reflecting back what I'd heard was something pretty surprising. He was mostly frustrated that he wasn't getting a heads up when there were problems. Now, these folks said that they were doing Scrum, but they were not escalating problems, right? So that was a pretty big find for me. I was pretty excited when I heard that. So I said, and then, this went on. There's a long process here. I'm not going to go into the detail, but basically what I said next was, hang on, you're okay with them using story points? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. Right, but it didn't sound like that initially. So, where we went from there was to make sure, and this is an ongoing thing, so we put in place some actions. We took some actions, well, really, they took the actions to make sure it was really clear that the VP of engineering was not going to go around punishing people when they failed. He wanted to know up front so he could help, right? So they're in their process of communicating that and demonstrating that they really mean that. It's not just words. So that's interesting. All right, so by reflecting back and paraphrasing with active listening, you can often find out more information, and there's a lot of examples in sometimes the solution is actually right there in what somebody says in their question. But in this case, really, the clarification pulled out the real problem. Right, so that's some of the power of active listening. Now, moving on from there, self-awareness and self-management is kind of a big topic, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail there. Highly recommend, again, the book Emotional Intelligence 2.0. But the idea here, and I just blogged on this, so you can go to our blog and check this out, on healthy agile coaching. So it has a little bit more in there. It's a pretty short blog, but the main point I want to make on self-awareness and self-management is this is a great way for you as the Agile coach to look in the mirror on a real-time basis, right? So when you're coaching, you can sometimes get into what I would call autopilot mode. So I had to go get a drug test the other day for an upcoming engagement, and I dropped my kid off at school, and then I was supposed to be heading there, but I actually put in the GPS to go to work. And there's a couple of different routes, so I had to make sure which one was fast that morning. And I didn't pay attention to the GPS. I didn't pay attention to anything. I just started going to work, and I missed the turn to go to the appointment I had for that morning. So it worked out all right, but I was in autopilot, right? And so as an Agile coach, you can get into the same thing. you hear a problem, and you might immediately go to, ooh, I know how to fix that. Here's my advice on that. Here's what we need to do. Here's what you need to do, right? So you always want to be thinking, to be aware, am I paying attention to the client, or am I trying to impart my biases, my preferences, the way I would do this? And so if while you're coaching, you're thinking, am I listening? Am I taking on the perspective of the person I'm coaching? Then you can self-manage. And so the point in the blog there really is to come up with how you see Agile coaching, and to go through a mental checklist as you're coaching to see if you're on track or not. Right? So that's the point there I wanted to make on self-awareness and self-management. So this all leads up to communication, because really emotional intelligence, active listening, all this stuff is really part of communication. And this next slide is kind of complicated. I'm not trying to impart everything here. I really want to make the point with this slide that communication is complicated. And all of these things that we've been talking about so far will help you with communication. So, two people trying to talk, this is even just two people. You got an internal thought, you got to translate it into words, you got to deliver it through the channel, which would be things like, so in this case, right, so you can see me talking. It may be face-to-face, it may be just audio, it could be an email, whatever. So it goes through this complicated process and goes back and forth. So part of this, with active listening is that before you give back your thought, oh, here's my response to that, you might start with clarifying, did I hear that internal thought? Am I really getting what that person is trying to communicate? So this model is basically a combination of Satir, Shannon, and Weinberg models of communication. So really the keys here, to boil it down, is good emotional intelligence, practicing active listening, trying to understand what the other person is saying before responding, reflecting back to confirm and clarify. Okay, so what we've covered so far is actually some Agile coaching tools, and now we're going to get into some additional tools, if you will. So this is one that now you may or may not, feel free to use this. You may or may not use this exact tool. The idea is, as an Agile coach, you need some techniques for imparting your knowledge and Agile thinking into other folks. So this is just an example. This is one that I created over a year ago. I found to be extremely useful in explaining to people what Scrum is. People very often misunderstand Scrum. So the idea here is, it's a thought experiment. You say, hey, imagine that you and your team are locked in a room for 2 weeks. Now, it's a thought experiment. I'm not saying to actually do it. But this helps people understand what's going on. So you say, all right, here's the exercise. You're going to imagine that you're locked in the room, with your coworkers, with that team, and the goal is you don't have to go in until all the work for the iteration matches the definition of ready that you've agreed to, but nobody gets out until all of that work for the iteration is done according to the definition of done, right? So how would that change your behavior? That's the exercise. So this is something that we teach folks that are going through Agile training. This is also something that we impart to Agile coaches as a technique for Agile coaching. So, things that typically come out, very often people joke and they say, we're dragging the product owner in the room with us. But that helps them start thinking things like, well, if I'm locked in that room, I can't go to the other stand-ups. Well, what do you mean? What other stand-ups? Well, I got 5 stand-ups a day. Oh, 5 stand-ups a day. I think we have something to talk about there, right? So it's a great technique for people to really get an understanding for what Scrum is. Not that Scrum is all of Agile. And if you really want to put a point on it, you can say nobody gets paid until all that work is done. And then the idea is to say, well, okay, so that was interesting in the thought experiment, all those things you wrote down, how you would change behavior. So you're going to help other people, you're going to ask for help, you're a developer, and you're going to, also do some testing. There's no reason you have to be locked in a room to do those things. Why not just think about actually doing them if you think that's going to help you? All right, so another technique that we like to use is something called the process agreement. I'm going to skip through here. All right, so there's a whole bunch of things. These are all examples of what it means to do Scrum. So when somebody says we do Scrum, they might mean that they just have a stand-up meeting and they call it a Scrum meeting, and that's Scrum, and that's all they do. They don't have retrospectives, they don't have a product owner, they don't have a Scrum master, but they do Scrum. All right, so the idea here is, rather than saying you do Scrum, here's some things that you might mean write down what you agreed to do. Now, I'm not advocating Scrum Bot, right? Let's do Scrum Bot. We're not going to do these parts of Scrum. I'm advocating get out on a piece of paper what you absolutely agree to do, right? Not what you aspire to do, but what you actually absolutely will do. And many teams, when going through some training, they get this. They'll say, I don't know what you mean. We want to do it all. Fantastic. Now, if they didn't write down the stand-up meeting, now you've got something to talk about. Well, why not? Right, so this helps get some ownership, some buy-in, and also can bring up some great conversations. And help people understand that if you're not doing all of these things, you're not doing Scrum per se. Maybe it's a great place to start, but let's try to aspire for doing all of these things. And then they can say, well, we can't possibly do that here. And again, that brings up, that's a conversation that you have now. So that's really, on the coaching side, what I wanted to talk about today. So let's move on now and talk about certification in ICAgile. So if you're not already familiar with ICAgile, fantastic organization, and they have a whole curriculum. So it's not that they teach these things. They have a number of learning objectives across this whole, I like to call the beautiful peacock picture here. So all kinds of different tracks, and we're focused on the Agile coaching track. So within the Agile coaching track, to become a certified Agile coach through ICAgile, right, Certified Expert Agile Coaching, ICEAC, the requirements are that you get the ICP, the ICP ATF, the ICP ACC, and so very quickly, the ICP is basically Agile fundamentals, right? So that would be sort of equivalent to, say, CSM training or something like that. Now, you do need to get the certificate specifically from them, so you can either take, a course from one of the providers, but more likely for you Agile for those of you that are Agile coaches or Scrum Masters, what you would do would be to work with them and say, hey, I already have the CSM. Did I miss any learning objectives, right? So anyway, that's a conversation with ICAgile. They can help you with that. Next up, to become Certified Pro on Agile Team Facilitation. Right, so this is the workshop that we're offering February 3rd and 4th in Boston. The ICAgile learning objectives are called Agile Team Facilitation. Our course is called Breakthrough Agile Coaching, and it absolutely covers the learning objectives in Agile Team Facilitation and more. You can learn more about that on our website. But whether it's through ours or other providers to get the ICP ATF. And then the next step is to become Certified Pro Agile Coaching. Right, so that's specifically on Agile coaching. Agile team facilitation is a little bit more on the facilitation side. And if you go to something like Agile team facilitation, you might think if you're already a coach, you're like, well, I know a lot of this stuff. We're going to give you stuff that you might not expect, but the other thing is you're going to get that certification, and it's yet another step towards becoming a certified Agile coach. And there actually aren't all that many places to get an Agile coach certificate from. You may be pro or against a certification, but I got to say I'm a big believer in ICAgile certification process. I think they've really got it going on there. So then, once you have those three, the next step is to spend time applying that knowledge that you've gained to build your Agile coaching competencies. And so they recommend some number of months. I don't remember exactly, but basically you can't get to the next step until you've applied that knowledge for a while. And if for you it's like, okay, you believe you had that and you're just getting certified, okay, great, work with them, they'll figure out a proper timing. The final step though is to go through their gate review, and so it's live. They're going to assess your competency. There's industry recognized experts, so for instance, on the panel there might be Alyssa Adkins or Michael Spade or somebody like that. And basically, you're going to provide references, you're going to provide a video, they're going to look through the video, they're going to talk to your references and say, hey, talk to me about your experience with this person when they were training you, coaching you, how did they do this, how did they do that? And then they're going to give you a live coaching situation. So here's the situation, and live, you're going to work with a person through Zoom to show that you've got what it takes to be an Agile coach. Make it all the way through that gauntlet, and boom, you get the Certified Expert in Agile Coaching from ICAgile. So basically, we're a big fan of that, and that's why we put together this workshop on February 3rd and 4th. We just actually yesterday got the Certified Pro Agile Coaching accredited, so we're going to be offering that very soon. And we want to make this path as easy as we possibly can for folks. And that really helps us because, believe it or not, there just aren't enough really awesome Agile coaches out there. So a little bit about Eliassen. So I'm part of the Eliassen Agile coaching or Agile practice, right? And we have a number of coaches both here at Eliassen, and then we have a large network of folks that we leverage out in the field. And these aren't the only kinds of Agile coaches that exist, but these are the ones that we primarily work with. Scrum Master, Team Coach, Enterprise Coach, Product Coach, and Technical Coach. It's really been a huge uptick in the demand for technical coaches, by the way. So these are the kinds of positions that we're looking to fill within our engagements. And the way that that would work is that, folks come to us and they want to go Agile or become more Agile, and we'll put together a transformation program with them and then use our folks and our network to get that up and going. So that's a little bit about Eliassen. And here's the book recommendations as promised, and this will be in the video. So if you're only going to read 19 books on Agile coaching, these are the 19 I would recommend. Now, these are the 19 that that we really like. There are lots of other great books out there. Actually, for Agile, specifically Agile coaching, there really aren't that many. And I would say that Lisa Adkins is the one that focuses the most on how to be a coach as opposed to specific things to coach. But all the ones, I think there's like 3 out there specifically on Agile coaching. They're all really good. But Agile coaching is more than just specifically Agile coaching, right? So it's emotional intelligence, it's facilitation, all kinds of great stuff. So these are the books I'd recommend. And whether it's reading these books or whatnot, I highly recommend that as an Agile coach, you spend a fair amount of your time, some amount of time, a good amount of time reading books, going to webinars like this, workshops, working with other coaches, joining an Agile coaching circle, all that kind of stuff to really become a top-notch Agile coach. All right. So I think I've probably talked about our upcoming workshop enough, but do check it out. I want to point out, by the way, I don't think I mentioned this, but the retail on that is $14.95, and we've got an introductory, we're doing an introductory promo, so one time only, $1,000 off, so it's a pretty great deal there. It won't last forever. And our next webinar is next Tuesday, and that's called Agile Vital Signs. You can learn more about that on the website. So you're doing an Agile transformation. Is it healthy or not? Just like with a patient. How's the pulse? How's the breathing? Same thing for an Agile adoption. All right, so with that, I want to thank you. And it looks like we, I don't know, Mohab, if you held off or what, but we didn't have any questions. But what questions do we have now? And by the way, feel free to send in via the chat any questions you may have, and we've got something like 15 minutes here to answer those questions.
Yes, so Damon, thank you so much for the presentation, and we highly recommend that you also sign up for the webinar next week. It's a completion of this webinar and making you ready for the class if you decide to sign up. So we're taking questions. I didn't get any questions yet on the chat window, so feel free if you have any questions just to unmute yourself and ask the question to Damon. We have 10 minutes, so you can do that. So,
oh, and just let me clarify what you just said there, Mohab. These 2 webinars together are part of the prep work. There's a little bit more than that, but as soon as you sign up, we'll send you those materials. And also, if you're thinking of recommending the workshop to somebody, both webinars will be recorded so people can pick that up later.
So any questions? All right. So we have the webinar for today recorded. We will share the link with everyone so you can view it again, and we'll talk to you soon. So I'll just ask again, any questions?
Well, actually, maybe I can get something going here. So if we think back to the example I gave of the VP of engineering, I'd be curious what went through somebody else's head. You know, what did they hear? Did they hear the same thing? Did they hear something different? Okay, that's a good question. Are there PDUs associated with this webinar? I think actually there's you can always do that, and maybe we can do that offline. Oh, I see a couple of people unmuted. Oh, what are some of the most effective approaches to getting a process agreement in place? Let's see, from Geosoft. Okay. Well, it's to get the team together, you know, maybe during a retrospective or just a quick, you know, lunch kind of thing, or, you know, whenever the people can put the time aside. You know, just get the discussion going and saying, hey, what is our process? What are the things we all, you know, we get it up on a whiteboard. You can use the trifecta, I like to call, of Agile coaching, which is stickies with one concept per, and then people can write on stickies what they think of, and get it up there, dedupe, and then do some dot voting. So that's one that I've seen work really well. But at the end of the day, you know, as an Agile coach, you know, think of what are the different ways that you have for pulling information out of people, getting it up there, discussing it, coming up with a group consensus. Same thing for a process agreement. And when the video is up there, you can grab the raw material for the different items, or you just think, hey, what are the things that are in Scrum, the different pieces? So that's a good starting point.
So we have another question. What are some of the most effective approaches to getting a process agreement in place? The other one is lunch and learn, stickies, and group voting, pulling information out, and group consensus.
Oh, it looks like she was paraphrasing there. So lunch and learn, stickies and dot voting, pulling information out, and group consensus. Yes, that is what I was saying. That's funny.
Another question from Joe. What are the good techniques to uncover or draw out cultural approaches or barriers?
Ooh, well, that's a tough one. So there's figuring out different cultural approaches or barriers is definitely not one of the easiest things to do. But I would say whether it's cultural barriers or not, whenever you get a group of 2 or more people together, there's going to be some kind of cultural differences. Even if they're both male, both female, both same background, there's going to be cultural differences. So there's a technique that I like to use called a personal canvas, and the idea is that you know, you put down the sorts of things that are in your background. You know, where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? What are your skills? What were some things that were formative experiences? You know, talk about your culture, and just to get people to talk about themselves, right? Because at the end of the day, software is done with people. We're not machines, and Agile recommends, you know, long-standing teams. So you really need to get to know each other. So I don't think there's anything specific to Agile coaching other than spending time together to get to know each other. And it's also related to that, I think that if you're doing something like Scrum and you're trying to get working product together on a regular basis, then, you know, the friction and the differences are really going to come out. And in the retrospective, you know, why do we run into that? And to get down to the root cause, because there can be cultural differences and no problems at all, right? So I think retrospective is a great place to look at. How do we do, and, you know, what got in our way? And if one of them is cultural barriers, then great, but it might be something else. Okay, I could see a question about the February 3rd, 4th workshop. So actually, the locked room exercise is a good example of one of the exercises. So the coaches to, you know, look at themselves as being on a team, to go through that. The active listening, the emotional intelligence, you know, this was one way, but we'll be doing that in groups. So actually, you can get a full list of all of the activities off the website. There's a PDF that you can download that has something like, I don't know, there's like 30 things listed on there. Okay.
And thank you. Send the link for registering for the next webinar. So if anyone wants to register, they can use the link on the chat window.
Yep.
All right. Any more questions?
Okay. Other questions? All right. You know, one other thing for me is, you know, I think it's very important to get feedback. I mean, as Agilists, we all believe in retrospective. So, would love to get any thoughts of what people thought was particularly valuable out of this, or anything they thought, that could have been a little better. So, any thoughts on that would be great as well.
All right, thank you so much, Damon. If you have any questions regarding ICAgile or ICAgile certifications, you can contact us at support@icagile.com, and we'll be glad to answer any questions you have. All right.
Oh, I see somebody liked the VP exercise. Excellent.
Yep.
Thank you. That's good to know. All right, well, it sounds like we've hit a natural stopping point there. Thanks, everybody. And hopefully we'll see you on Tuesday, and maybe for some of you, we'll see you in February.